Alright, wonder what Yu-Gi-Oh! News we got today. What's going on, guys? It's Cimo. So today I wanted to do a discussion on a brand new card that just got announced in the Circuit Breaker set, which we're not going to be getting for a very long period of time, considering we don't even have Code of the Duelist yet. But this is a card that is going to have a tremendous impact on the game, and it kind of is going to rewrite a lot of, I guess, different notions and ways that we've kind of conceptualized playing the game, because this one card just has a insanely crazy effect, and I really wanted to discuss it, and that card is Struggling Battle. So Struggling Battle is a trap card which has the following effect. At the end of the battle phase, if your opponent controls more cards than you do, make your opponent banish cards they control face down, their choice, so that they control the same number of cards as you. If you control no cards, you can activate this card from your hand. Okay, so let's talk about the basic application of this card. So the primary application is if you have this card, let's assume like you're in the mid game, right? And you draw this card, you can set it, and then if your opponent has more cards than you do at the end of the battle phase, you can activate this card, and then it pretty much like pseudo Exciton Knights them, and they banish as many cards as they choose to. That makes it that their board equals your board, and then you pretty much continue playing the game from there. So just as a hypothetical example, if you were to control one monster and this card, and your opponent controls like 5 or 6 cards, then at the end of the battle phase, you activate this card, your opponent has to banish 4 cards they control face down because you have your monster, assuming your monster survived the battle phase, and then the trap card itself, because that is going to count itself as a card, meaning you have 2 to their 6, so they have to banish 4 cards face down. Now, so that kind of seems a little bit nutty just on its own because of the fact that it's this crazy kind of like equalizer-like card. You know, it kind of reminds me of Mirror Force in a weird kind of way, because Mirror Force kind of just wipes the board of all of our opponent's monsters and kind of 1 for 3s or 1 for 4s our opponent sometimes if they fall into it. But this card's a little bit different because it can also hit like spells and traps. Even though our opponent is in control of what they decide to banish, it still has an interesting application that kind of reminds me of that sort of equalizer type of card. But I think the biggest issue, and I think a lot of people are seeing this already as well, is the fact that if you have no cards in your control, you can activate Struggling Battle from your hand. Now, this might not be, you know, this might not seem like a big deal, but when you're looking at it from the perspective of the very beginning of the game, let's say you're going second. Your opponent does whatever the fuck they want to do, and then you take your turn. You don't do anything. You go straight to the battle phase, you end the battle phase where you can then activate Struggling Battle, and your opponent now has to banish every single card they control except for 1, because Struggling Battle does count as a card. So they're going to keep something out of it, but the fact that if your opponent just blew their load and just expended all of their resources onto the board, and you just have this one card that essentially just equalizes, that doesn't even equalize, that just flips the entire game around in your favor, your opponent's going to be left with 1 card on the field, and whatever cards they have left in their hand to be able to combat this. And I don't know if that's exactly healthy for the game. I mean, in a way, this card is kind of like Gores because you can't control any cards to use it, but the difference is Gores, you know, you had to attack into a Gores. This card, literally, if you're playing cards, Struggling Battle can punish you for it. It's exactly why Exciton Knight is banned in the TCG, is because it's just a completely, it's a card that you play if you're losing, and it rewards you for being behind. And Struggling Battle is not really that much different, and there's a lot of comparisons to be made between Struggling Battle and Exciton. Now, to be fair, Exciton is a little bit easier to make and more generic because it's a level 4. So, I mean, arguably, Exciton is probably a little bit better, but the thing about Exciton, every deck is probably going to have built-in outs to stop Exciton. Like, people are playing stuff like Solemn Warning. People are playing Solemn Strike and, you know, Forbidden Chalice now. Hell, even My Body would stop Exciton now as well. There is no, like, main deck out for Struggling Battle. Like, people are gonna have to start main decking, like, really weird cards if they want to have a way to negate this. And that just seems like, that just doesn't seem healthy to me. People shouldn't have to play these arbitrary cards that, like, no one wants to play just because this stupid card exists. Now, the other thing I wanted to discuss with this card as well is how big of an impact is it really going to have? Because, you know, as I'm talking about this card, and the more and more I do talk about it, it does seem a little bit nuts. So let me give you a hypothetical example here. So let's take Zoodiac, because Zoodiac is pretty much the deck we're all familiar with of this format. So on a standard Zoodiac combo, you know, you're gonna have your one, let's just say you have a Rapier, right? So Rapier can net you an ending board of a Zoodiac Trident, a Daigusto Emerald, and then one card to draw. Possibly a second, you know, if you're getting the Thoroughblade, but I want to be very generic here with what we're doing and very simplistic. So one rat ends you with an Emerald, a Trident, and a card in your hand. And then, depending on what else is in your hand, you're going to set cards in your back row. So let's, for this example, assume you're going to set like 2 to 3 back row. So that leaves you with about 2 to 3 cards in hand. So what's going to happen is, if your opponent does, you know, goes second and does the Struggling Battle play, what's going to happen? Well, you're most likely going to either leave your Trident on board, or maybe one of your back row, depending on what it is. Maybe it's something really powerful. I don't really know, but most likely that's what's going to end up happening. So your Emerald's going to be banished, and you're going to banish all of your back row, most likely than, more likely than not. So that's going to leave you with a lone copy of Zoodiac Trident, or one disruptive card is really what I'm getting at. And then you also have the 2 to 3 cards that are remaining in your hand, depending on what you didn't set. So realistically, that's a 4 to 4 in terms, well, 4 to 5, I guess, in terms of card advantage. And your opponent had to sacrifice their battle phase as well as their main phase 1 to get it off. And they're really only getting one card out of it. And the thing is, especially in the context of Zoodiac, with the way the deck can just use simple one-card combos and things like that, you know, recovery for a deck like that isn't too difficult. So being only one card behind, and also to mention, you still have your Trident on the board or your one disruptive card sitting there. So realistically, you can stop one of their cards when they decide to do their plays in main phase 2, and that's still going to give you a chance to actually play the game, because on your next turn you're still going to have a handful of cards that you can use at your disposal. Maybe you have hand traps to stop your opponent's plays in main phase 2. Whatever the case may be, you know, when you're looking at that turn 1 instance, in the context of something like Zoodiac, or something that can acquire just a lot of advantage like that, it actually doesn't look too bad. But I think the bigger thing we need to talk about here is how practical is this actually to happen? Because the problem that I see with Struggling Battle is not only the fact that you have to run this card in your deck, but if you're gonna run it, let's assume you're running even multiple copies of it, you have to open it if you want to even achieve something to that effect to essentially counter our opponent's turn 1 play. And how often are you really gonna do that? Well, I mean, you know, percentage wise, you probably have like anywhere from like a 34 to like a 44% chance of that happening going first. If you're drawing a 1 of 3, you know, excuse me, going second if you're drawing a 1 of 3 because you have 6 cards in hand. So you're only going to open Struggling Battle 1 of every 3 to 4 games at best. And even if you open it, that doesn't assume that you're even going second. If you're going first, this card isn't really that good because you're going to be presumably ahead in terms of card advantage, which means Struggling Battle is then susceptible to removal, and because it's so conditional and has to be used at the end of the battle phase, it's not even really that good because it's not like it's a, you know, a more chainable generic card like Chalice or, you know, Solemn Strike or something that has a much easier activation condition. This card is very strict in when it's allowed to be played. So, you know, overall, looking at this card, is it really worth running this card, relinquishing your main phase 1 and your battle phase, and to an extent kind of hoping that you go second to run this card? You know, I don't really know, and I'm kind of glad for once that we are in the TCG because we get to actually observe as the OCG gets this card if it's something that's very practical. This card would have a very interesting role in the side deck, I think, because if you know that you're going second, you could potentially side this card in because you know you're going to be behind an advantage, so you could potentially pull something like that off, and I'd be very curious to see if that has any effect. But I think ultimately, because this card is so conditional, you know, you need to run it in place of, you know, good cards, honestly, and you also have to draw into it. I don't really know if this card is really good enough to make the cut, but guys, I really want to hear what your guys' opinion is in the comments down below, because this is a very polarizing and controversial card at the moment, and I kind of just wanted to give you guys my thoughts on what I thought about it, because, you know, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens. But guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you found this video informative, consider backing me on Patreon, because just by pledging only $1 a month, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time. 2, 3, 4.